Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of this Post Concussion Syndrome Awareness podcast. My name's David, and following the first 2 episodes, I want to talk a little bit about sports injuries today. I'll focus on probably UK and North America, but I'm sure if there are, we've got plenty of other members and there'll be listeners around the world. If you have any comments or details of different types of injuries, different sports and things, then please just let us know. Get in touch. You can get in touch through, I think, Spotify or Anchor. You can leave a voice message. If you go to Twitter, look us up at Post Concussion. And on Facebook, look for the groups Post Concussion Syndrome Awareness Worldwide. There's 6 or 7 groups there altogether. The main group's probably the best way to get in touch. Or you can message me personally, David Bottomley, on Facebook, and be really glad to hear from you. So before we begin with that, today's podcast might be a little bit shorter than some of the others, because I've got my lovely son Arlo here with me. He's only 5, and he's here in the school holidays. So just while he's tucking into his second breakfast of the morning, I'm going to just talk a little bit, and then obviously we're heading out for the day. So the first thing I want to mention is a few people contacted me after listening to and reading the posts about the first couple of podcasts, asking which company we represent, or what business we're plugging or promoting, or how much money we're making out of this. And I said the same to all of them. Nobody and nothing. It's just me, myself, sat here recording this on my phone, on my digital recorder. I've been doing this since 2009, as I mentioned in the first podcast in the introduction to what we do. And every year since, I've give my own time every day. I don't know, it's usually a few hours a day, most days, not every single day, but some days it's a lot longer. Some days I will spend a whole day just going around things, updating things. We've got 6 or 7 Facebook pages and groups, as well as Action for Hidden Disability and Hidden Illness too. That's one that you probably don't know so much about. Plus other healing groups and things which are more on the like photonic spiritual side of healing. So you may not all be familiar with those, but they're all aimed at the same ends, really. As well as the Twitter accounts, the 2 Twitter accounts, main one relating to post-concussion syndrome, and obviously I get queries through my own personal one as well. Then we've got the blog, which for many years, I was a private address, a .com address. I think WordPress were charging me, every year was about £30 a year or something, or whatever it was, plus extra fees. So now it's just on WordPress because I don't have that much money. I still don't have that much money, so I can't kind of be paying for that as well. And then just the general cost, internet, time and everything. So I've never ever kind of once thought, oh yeah, I can make some money out of this, or I can sell something or whatever. And I know that many of our members are in business for themselves. A lot of them are motivational, or they have their own health concerns. They're very highly qualified. They do a wonderful job, and a lot of them have been through PCS and come out the other side, and then changed and turned their lives around, and gone into business, helping people in means of health, brain health support, and all kinds of things. So they do fantastic work, and obviously they're looking, at a different aspect, a different angle. They're looking at people that obviously can afford the services, that can use them as well, and that's wonderful. I've all admiration for them. But for myself, no, I not only have post-concussion syndrome, but I've had fibromyalgia all my life, and that got markedly worse when I became homeless. When I was homeless, I contracted pleurisy twice, And if you've ever had pleurisy in the middle of an English winter with nowhere to live, you'll know it's a pretty rough illness. You can't breathe. You're just constantly coughing, and you've got no energy and in pain. So that brought on fibromyalgia for me. On top of that, I get costochondritis, which sometimes kind of mimics heart problems or like heart attack. I had my legs cut to pieces by surgeons, which I think I mentioned before, and I also get like histamine intolerances and food intolerances. So it's just like every day's like a juggling act. But it's actually teaching me. It's teaching me much more. And although I started to recover from PCS back in 2012, and I've got better and better since, I've still had setbacks. And the setbacks have meant that I can't, since I think maybe 2008 or whenever, or before that, I've not been able to work a full-time job. So that then presents you with different choices. You don't get to choose where to live. You have to rely on like housing benefit, other things like that. At the moment, I can work 1 or 2 evenings a week. As like fibromyalgia makes it really difficult to get going and work in the mornings. Although I have fun here when Arlo's here, my son's here, and he wakes up at 4:30 and like, Daddy, it's time to get up. It's breakfast time now. And I say, Arlo, it's not even light yet. So I'm still trying to educate him on the art of having a little lie-in the morning. But bless him, he's great fun. I'm not making anything out of this, and I don't intend to. At the moment, it's not about that. I really want to impress that strongly, and if you ask Gina and Teresa and the others, and Scarlett, they'll all just say, well, we're not in it to make money either, and none of them have ever suggested that. We have an ethos in the groups that we don't allow advertising and sales, supplements, stuff like that, because it's not fair on you while you're recovering to be bombarded with people trying to sell you, whatever the motivation, trying to sell you whatever they're selling. So we try and keep it as much as possible a completely commercial, charity, sales-free zone. So I hope that clears that up. But if you've got any more questions, just contact me again, because I'm always happy to answer questions. Right, so on to another thing that's happening in a couple of weeks' time. We've got Laurie from Groups. Laurie lives out in the Midwest or north of USA. And in a couple of weeks, she's going to be helping me record an interview, which is going to be out on 1 or 2 of the podcasts. Laurie's one of those amazing people that said has turned their life around and gone on to educate themselves and get qualifications and develop a business in order to help others with their brain injuries and concussion and so on. So she'll be joining me, I think probably towards the middle or the end of the month, and we'll let you have that as soon as that's out, and more about her later. So it's Laurie Camper-Kearney. I hope I've said that right, I pronounced that right. I'm sure she'll tell me if I haven't. That's going to be probably in just over a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And also, I've had quite a few messages already, a couple from people in the UK. There's a gentleman called Pete in London who's just, I think, been injured this year. And he's had a really rough time, bless him. He lives in, like me, not a very wealthy or middle class part of the country, and some people's names all change, obviously, for their own anonymity. But he's really struggled. He's on his own with 2 young children, and he had a concussion after an accident at work earlier in the year. What he's finding is he just can't get any help, and he says, thank you for putting this out, thank you for creating the groups, and he's saying he found us via the blog, which is Post Concussion Syndrome UK .wordpress.com. You can find it on WordPress as Post Concussion Syndrome Awareness, and he's saying he'd pretty much given up until he found us. So that's really nice to hear. So yeah, just hang in there, Pete, and keep in touch with the main group. Keep in touch with the conversations and the threads and things. And one thing to say to everybody is, if you look in those groups, there's usually, I don't know if it should still be there, but there's a search option. So you can type in a term to search for, and it filters through all the posts, all the years. So if you put in, say, CBD oil and hit search in the group, it should come up with like a chronological list of all the posts and discussions where CBD oil's been mentioned. And I think that's really a fantastic tool to have as well. Otherwise, we get like repeated conversations, people asking the same questions again and again and again, and then you might miss some of the information that's previously been given as well. So check that out as well. Another message to a lady I'll call Lucy. She lives up near towards the border, England and Scotland. Again, she's complained bitterly about the NHS and the National Health Service here, and I can't really argue with a lot of what she says. She says she'd been lied to about that she'd get treated or that she'd get to see somebody, and she's had to complain to her GP surgery, and now they're treating her like a leper, basically. So I've sent her some information and sent her some details on how to go about kind of freeing herself from the system. You're not going to get a lot of help apart from medications. You might get a CT scan or an MRI scan. The only reason the NHS do that, and those are their only two scanners, by the way, they don't have any DTI or anything else. The only reason they do a CAT scan, CT scan or an MRI scan is to rule out anything more serious. And that's to protect themselves as much as it is you. But apart from that, they can't really go any further. And so it's a difficult one, because unless you can pay maybe thousands of pounds to go private, to find a private clinic that has a more kind of detailed intensive scanner like a DTI or whatever, then you're never going to get those answers. And so the problems, as I said before, with finding the actual damage on scanners with mild traumatic brain injury is problematic, but it's particularly problematic in the UK. We've got literally, it's like trying to read a map with a telescope, if you like, for want of a better analogy. So yeah, Lucy, just keep in touch and see how it goes. And obviously you can do and find many things cheaply which can help you aid your recovery quickly, without having to wait for months and years like I did, to hope that the NHS will suddenly one day just wake up and realise that people with mild traumatic brain injury and post concussion syndrome are worthy of treatment. That's not a slight on the NHS, but there needs to be something in the public eye. There needs to be something very prominent that makes them take notice. And until we get that, because this country is entirely driven by our media now, they rule everything. They kind of like crush freedom of speech on certain topics and things, and they keep everybody in order, everybody policing themselves. It's like a real divide and conquer thing at the moment with the media, and it's unfortunately getting worse. So yeah, nothing against the NHS, but Lucy, but they aren't going to be there always to help you. If you lived in an affluent area or a nice middle class area where there's a big middle class population, then you might find one or two GPs that are helpful and will arrange scans and neurologists and things. But if you live in the poorer areas or the inner cities and places like that, then you've literally got one chance in 1,000 of getting treated properly, rather than just loaded with drugs and things. Okay, and we've had a couple more messages, one from Canada and one from the West Coast, USA. Two more people that have just found us through the podcast. I think they saw it on Twitter. Both of them just saying they love what I'm doing. So I know I'm not professional in doing this. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm enjoying it. And yeah, they're just saying you keep it up and, let us have new episodes as and when they come out. So yeah, I'll try and do maybe 2 or 3 a week. We'll see anyway, depending on other things going on, and then video casts later. And that's about it for now. So yeah, keep messages coming. Keep in touch. Any comments, criticisms, anything you want, that's all right. I don't mind. I've got broad shoulders. I can take criticism as well. If it's something that you'd like to hear about or something that you'd like to be included, then just say so. Okay, so the main issue I wanted to talk about today is sports injury, particularly brain injury. Because I think that the whole area covers, you've got different types of injuries in sports. And I want to just mention the differences in attitude as well that we have between a general injury, say breaking a leg or an arm or somebody hurting the back or, slipping a disc. And then the perceived difference with maltraumatic brain injury or brain injury. So I'm going to go back to the sport I was brought up with, watching. I wasn't much of a player, but since I was 5 years old, I went to see my local team play football. So in football, yeah, every now and then you'll get players injured. They might get a hamstring injury or tendons, or if they're more unlucky, they might fracture or break a leg, or they might have like a cruciate or knee injury that will keep them out possibly for months. Then they'll have the physio and they'll have a whole team there to help them heal. And, the people are asking after them, there's a lot of attention and a lot of coverage given to that about injuries. And the longer term injuries can be particularly hard on football players. There's a couple of players at my local club. I think one's been out now for nearly 2 years through groin injury. And there's a big part that mental health and issues surrounding mental health have to play in injury. And so all that time a player's away from a club, they can maybe isolated on what's going on. So it's really down to the club to keep them involved. Now with the brain injuries and with concussions, it seems to be quite different, because a player can get a concussion during a game and they could be taken off or even stretchered off. But then within a week or 2 or 3, they're back in action, or sometimes even less. And you might find that, they may seem okay, or they may well be playing again, but quite often you see that the performance can be affected, and they're not quite the same again. You could find also that some may not seem any different. Some just get straight on with it. And I'm sure there's a lot more concussions and minor concussions and things that go on in football that go totally unnoticed. Players bang heads and, they're down for a minute, they get back up, they put the magic sponge, the cold sponge on the head and or put a bandage on and then they're back up and they keep going again. I know the rules have changed to say a game has to be stopped when there's a clash of heads, but a lot of them seem to just carry on through it. So there's a massive debate in the USA right now, in Canada, about school sports, contact sports, football, and everything really, whether children should be playing them or not. So there's a massive divide there. It seems to be yet another divide in society that is I wouldn't say it's all driven by the media, but there's credit to both sides, both arguments. So, but generally with contact sports at school, there should be a lot more precautions taken, and we hear so many stories in our caregivers and parents group about parents whose children are still at school or college, and they're out of it. They've literally had a concussion through playing sports, and now they're just that the mood, everything's changed about them. Their entire demeanor's changed. They've got no energy. They don't mix. They can't feel alienated, and you must think, well, the peer pressure is bad enough for an adult who's had a brain injury, a maltraumatic brain injury. You can't imagine what it's like for a teenager to have that peer pressure as well from your friends and not wanting to really kind of join in with what you did before, and not feeling motivated, feeling emotional ability, feeling kind of turned off of doing things. And then having the also pressure of your family, your parents, your siblings, and others not understanding what's wrong with you. Now, I know a lot of the mums and dads in the caregivers and parents group, from what they post and what I read, they're doing an absolutely amazing job, and trying to understand what their children are going through. But I can imagine that there's a fair number more of kids that have had a concussion at school or in sports, and they must be really struggling. The statistics always show us, down the years, they haven't changed much, but they still say that it's younger men, usually of lower social standing, that have the predominance, the most concussions and brain injuries. Now, I know if you look through the Facebook groups, the majority of members, or a larger majority of members, are female. But what you probably think and understand about the actual statistics is that when it says males, often of different race, of lower social standing, from poor homes, poor areas, they're far less likely to come onto social media and to want to, or to be able to express themselves in a group which is very mixed, and they may not even want to do that. And the majority of them may not even know they're suffering with post concussion syndrome. And that's a subject for another episode, where we look at the use of drugs and alcohol and things, which is very, very common for people to self-medicate with post-concussion syndrome. That's something that happens quite a lot. So back to sports. With sports, we get the news here from America, and I'd seen the news in years gone by about CTE and the NFL players. And that was tragic to me. I mean, the fact that they were donating their brains to science to study was a heartbreaking story. I shed a few tears when I first heard about that. It's really, really sad. But the courage to do that was just beyond words. And in terms of the NFL, I certainly know from Facebook, Dr. John DeWitt, who was an NFL player, and he is now helping people from the other side of the scale. He's taken his doctorate degree and everything, and he's helping people in kind of amazing ways, and writing inspirational things, giving a lot of inspiration to brain injury survivors. And I can't imagine how some of those NFL players are still coping in that environment, because not a lot will have changed really. In this country as well, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a young boxer who died after following a fight. He was only 26 years old, I believe, and he passed away as a result of a fight. It was very, very sad to hear about that. And, boxing again is another sport where repeated blows can, lead you to real difficulty, if not occasional, fatal brain damage or even death. There was a wonderful film recently starring Paddy Considine, and I can't even remember the name of it now, but I think it was The Legend or something. It was about a boxer that had late in his career, a fight that was like to defend his title, to defend his championship, and he ended up coming away from the fight, going home, and then collapsing as he had an aneurysm, I think. So he'd had brain surgery following that and tried to rehabilitate, and it's a really stark, detailed looking, dramatic look at that side of things, how people cope afterwards. It's quite not one for family viewing, but if you look up, I can't remember the name of the film now, but it's Paddy Considine. It's a British film, and it really, really kind of hits home the point that, well, yeah, these are professional sports people, and they are just making a living, but the consequences of that can be really, really tragic. And so when something like that does happen, it's a point where you can try and raise awareness, try and fight for the fact that we should be protecting sports people more. Although you can't ban all sports where there's contact, I think that would be kind of detrimental to everybody concerned. But we could certainly do a lot to make things safer. And yes, I just remembered the name of the film, Paddy Considine, of course. It's The Journeyman, not Legend. So yeah, if you want to check that out. Also on the subject of sports, we've had a few members who have suggested as well that contact sports be banned, particularly in the USA, where in schools, or generally in schools up to a certain year age. Obviously that might not affect college football afterwards, or giving children or young people, young adults, teenagers, the chance to choose once they get past a certain age. Different ages I think have been bandied about, but 18 seems to be the kind of in between, the one that would fit easiest with most people, and then after that giving them the option to take the responsibility for their own well-being, so to speak. So I don't know what you think about that. Obviously, if you are listening in the States and you've got kids in college and school yourself, do you want to see a complete ban on contact sports up to age 18, or do you just want there to be an adjustment? Let me know what you think. The different sports, well, through the groups we've had many different people come and talk about their accidents. We've had people horse riding where they've been booked or thrown from a horse. We've had people in all kinds of competitions. We've had somebody that was actually caused an injury with an arrow to the chest. It actually jolted them, and despite having, besides the fact that they were wearing a padded vest or Kevlar vest or whatever you want to call it, the impact and the kind of lashing of the neck, and they ended up banging their head and getting concussed as well. So I think, as we know anyway, and that I've seen over the last 10 years, your concussions, your mild traumatic brain injuries can come in any part, any walk of life, with so many accidents at work, where employees have been going about their daily work, where something's fallen on them like a shelf, or somebody's dropped a tire, tires hit them on their head, all kinds of things, you name it. And the employers aren't always really very open-minded, and usually not willing to admit any kind of fault or liability, from what I've heard. So those poor people end up going on the sick, looking for welfare, and then trying to get their insurance. Or, as I believe in the United States, if your insurance runs out after a certain time, then it won't pay for anything else. And then you're not only, to add insult to injury, literally, pardon the pun, but then you're left trying to prove that you're ill. And that's, as we said before in the first episode, that's where the legal profession comes in. And we've had them, kind of trying to infiltrate into groups and hounding people. So it's pretty horrific. But you can imagine for anybody, let alone a sportsman or sportswoman, you're there trying to fulfill your contract of employment and do your work to the best of your ability, and you get injured, whether it's in sports, a professional sports person, or if you're doing it for fun, for the pure joy of sport, or whether you work in your job. So yeah, there's something that needs to be discussed in future, going forwards, is how this can be tackled, how this can be dealt with. There's no standard baseline test or blood test or anything that's actually fully developed at the moment that's commercially available to people, where you can have a test and it can show up as a mild traumatic brain injury. Even people who have had the more moderate or severe traumatic brain injuries can get accused of faking and malingering and things. And in fact, you still hear this from doctors in the UK, that it's made up, it's malingering, the person's looking for attention. And that kind of attitude, just infuriates you beyond belief. To add the insult to injury, as I did when I lost everything, lost my job, forced out of my job, lost my home, and then even still, I had, this was 10, 12 years ago, still then been kind of insinuated by doctors and people who I thought were friends, but really were just mindless, speaking mindless rubbish, really, saying, "Oh, aren't you just putting it on? Aren't you just pretending?" I'm like, well, what would I have to pretend for now? Seriously, if I wanted to be delusional, or if it was some kind of sociopath or narcissist pretending to be looking for sympathy, I think I could do a lot better than pretending to be mildly brain injured. So yeah, you've got to keep a sense of humour. I think you've got to keep a sense of humour in the face of kind of pure just ignorance and denial sometimes, and just laugh it off and just leave that person behind you. They're not going to be a part of your future if people are treating you that way. They're not going to be a part of your healing, and they're not going to be any use to you, really. Don't be looking to please them by trying to explain yourself. Just move along. So yeah, sports leads us into daily life, and some of the problems that sports people face are very, very different from your average person, your average job. They usually will have access to much better quality healthcare, private clinics, and depending on what team they play for, the best clinics in the country or the world. I've heard tales of footballers and other athletes who've had injuries, concussions, like going, flying abroad to get treatment, to wherever their club will pay for. As we know, sport these days, particularly football and football type sports, contact sports, boxing, they're multi-million, billion-dollar franchises and things. So, it's a world apart from those of us who are kind of down on ground level, every day, Sarah or Joe in the street. And I think there's not really a filtering down yet of the types of treatments and things that are available to the very wealthiest, to the very richest. Because in their eyes, their sport the show must go on and things must continue as normal. So I guess if you were to have some kind of role reversal, like in the book, The Prince and the Pauper, if you had a role reversal, and any one of us, ordinary people, could take the treatment and the kind of everything that goes with being a top sports star, we'd probably have recovered really quickly. And I mean, like within days or weeks or, no time. And those poor people that taken our places would be, kind of in a real mess. So whilst it's easy to kind of compare that way, nothing's ever black and white. This also brings on the questions of equality, and society, I guess, is a big issue at the moment all over the world. not just in Western countries, in the East as well. There's protests everywhere, Hong Kong, Spain, South America. People being a bit fed up, and mainly the causes for concern are very similar. The cost of living, education, transport, but mainly healthcare. Healthcare is one of the biggest ones where people really had enough. In the UK here, we're meant to have, we've had for 80, 90 years, however long it is, we've had the National Health Service, which was started as a public body, state-run, but now it's actually 90% or more private. So on the surface you've got the hospitals, the doctors, nurses, everything underneath it, the management, the investment sectors, everything is privatised. And now there's been this big campaign to try and save it. Although it has been something of a red herring in many ways, because all the privatisation has been going on for years, and sometimes the governments kind of use that to hide other things they've been doing. I think naughty as they are. So the costs of healthcare, if you think, like I said before, we paid all of our lives here in taxes into this national insurance, they called it. It was like an insurance policy, so we'd pay an insurance policy for our healthcare, and in case we were sick and didn't have to work. But all that money's been blown on, various wars and things, and wasted away by, public servants who don't really have to worry because it's not their money. It's the people's money in effect, without getting too political. But now we see all these shortages in the health system here, where people are having to wait months and years for what they used to have to wait weeks for. I think it's got to the point where even the people that work in the system are so stressed and tired of it, and they know how badly mismanaged it is. So you think what actual chance do the patients stand? And so, like we said before, we can't blame the doctors and the nurses and the specialists and surgeons. They're doing the best they can with what tools they have and what knowledge they have. But above that, there's always a political means. There's always the money that runs and lobbies government, the pharmaceutical companies, and that's massive. It's absolutely huge here. Probably not as big as it is in Washington, but it's absolutely huge. So hence why in 2012 I found my own way, and I think a lot of people did around about the same time and have done since as well. And you can always tell them, the ones in the groups that are recovering, that have recovered as well, the positive ones, often you don't hear from them for ages because they're getting on with their lives. It's the nature of what we do over the years, is people come and go. Some people are there constant because they know that even once they've got a bit better or once they've recovered, that they need to take up the cause, like take up the mantle to try and help other people as well. So it's always there as an opportunity. You can either take it or you can pass it up. So there's always a chance for somebody that's had a brain injury, that's had a concussion and post-concussion syndrome. There's always a chance for them to turn to some type of healing themselves. Whether it be in a practical way as a health coach, or to do with fitness, brain fitness and health, or if it's to actually, like some people have, gone on to study medicine and even neuroscience and get into that business themselves. So they may be more respected in some ways. Definitely those people can be more respected by the people that they serve and other people that have post-concussion syndrome, because they'll be one of the very, very, very tiny number of doctors or health coaches that have actually been through the illness, that actually have an empathy and understanding. So anyway, we'll leave most of that for another day. But for now, thanks again for listening. You can find us on Facebook. That's Post-Concussion Syndrome Awareness Worldwide. The main groups are easy to find. You can contact me on Facebook, David Bottomley, and on Twitter at Post Concussion, and then our blog, which also has all the links and much more information, personal stories, history, articles, all kinds of things, and then lists of remedies and things you can try. That is Post Concussion Syndrome Awareness UK.wordpress.com. Okay, thanks again for listening, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.